Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It is the 28th of March, and I'm so glad that you could all join me this Thursday as we sit still embroiled in the swirls of Brexit to spend our half an hour thinking about the ancient world. As always, you've sent in some fantastic questions, and I'm looking forward to answering them as best I can and sharing them with you, also with what's on in the classical world and new discoveries that have come to light, as well as new books that you guys have been flagging, and some things that I wanted to flag with you as well. So great pleasure to have this half hour with you. And you may have seen we are in a new location. I promised you a new mystery location this week. You may just be able to guess it by looking at the picture behind me if you can see the writing that's on some of the packets that are displayed within the picture. Can anyone see it? It says the London Library. Hello Alexis, hello Jacob, how are you doing? Great that you could join in today for the live Q&A. It says the London Library. And here I am in the London Library on the top floor, on the 6th floor, kind of in one of their annex kind of meeting rooms that you can be booked out. So beneath me are 5 floors of over 1 million volumes of knowledge in one of the best libraries in London that we can all join to spend our days kind of looking up and finding out more about the past. It's one of my favourite places to work when I'm here in London. And today it gives me not only a chance to talk to you, but a great view as well out of the window to the left over the rooftops of London itself. Good afternoon, Laura. Good afternoon, Angela from Tokyo. Hello, how are you doing? Wow, John, nice to see you. Thank you so much all for joining in. Great that you could join us. So yes, coming live to you from the London Library this afternoon. So let's get cracking with some of your great questions. So we had a question in from Irvin Tilley from sunny but chilly Toronto. Thank you very much indeed. I think we are equally sunny, not quite so chilly here in London. Hello Linda, how are you doing? Great that you could join us. Thank you so much for tuning in. And this was in response to seeing my series on Sicily, which was re-aired on the BBC just this past week, and you can catch it on BBC iPlayer for another month or so. Sicily, the Wonder of the Mediterranean. We filmed this back in 2016, and it was a two-parter looking at the history of Sicily from earliest days of Sicilian history that we can know about through right to its modern present-day role, really on the front line of the biggest mass migration since World War II of people coming up from and taking to the seas from the coast of Libya, trying to make it towards Europe, fortress Europe, and the very open role that Sicily and its island of the island of Lampedusa, further south, closer to the Libyan coast, are playing in welcoming people to Europe as a result. Good afternoon, John. Good afternoon, Evan. How are you doing? Tanti saluti to Toronto. We are just about to answer your question. So having seen that Sicily series, Evan was asking about when we're talking about the Carthaginians on Sicily. So Sicily, for a good part of its early period in the archaic and early classical period, so the 6th, 7th, 6th, 5th centuries BCE, had quite a strong Carthaginian presence, and they were based mainly on the western side of the island at a place called Motya is where we went to, where today you can travel across on a small boat to this beautiful island, which is an entirely kind of an archaeological site, and which was a trading post of the Carthaginians prior to that, the Phoenicians on Sicily. And Arvin was asking about the religious sanctuary that we went to, where there were bowls in the ground, pots in the ground, that when they were excavated were filled with bones, human bones, child bones. Now, this kind of has been a fascinating aspect of the Carthaginian culture and Carthaginian world that has not just excited and interested us, but which fascinated indeed equally the ancients, and particularly the Romans, because it's through the Romans that we know so much about the Carthaginians, and particularly one Carthaginian, Hannibal, who would go on to take on the might of Rome in the 3rd century BCE. So, Owen's question is saying, looking at these amphoras filled with child ashes and bones, is this gruesome sacrifice an overwhelming, indisputable fact for all the Carthaginian civilization, or a piece of Greek and Roman propaganda? And Evan, you have hit the nail on the head. Hello, Jeremy. Thank you very much for tuning in from Switzerland. Great. And coming from Fiesole in Italy as well. Wow, we're Tokyo to Italy to Switzerland to Toronto to the UK. We are an international bunch today. Thank you so much for tuning in. So is child sacrifice an indisputable fact of Carthaginian culture, or is it something made up by the Greeks and Romans to make the Carthaginians out to be a horrible, nasty, uncivilized, barbaric lot? And this is an ongoing question that has plagued lots of scholarship. Now, when you get down to brass tacks and look at the sources, you are seeing kind of, probably on balance, in my view, the aspect, yes, that there was child sacrifice happening within Carthaginian culture, although not necessarily all of these urns filled with children's ashes can be directly related to child sacrifice, as opposed to simply infant mortality, the incredibly high rate of infant mortality that there would have been in the ancient world, leading to the deaths, lots of deaths in the early years of children, and then these children being cremated and kind of their remains set up within a religious setting. So not all of the different surviving kind of pots that hold children's ashes are necessarily examples of child sacrifice, but on balance, I would say that it did happen. And I think what we've got kind of caught up in is a couple of Roman sources that kind of go over the top in trying to make this out to be a massive cultural distinction that really set these two worlds completely apart. Whereas when you look at the majority of the sources, actually they're saying, look, you know, we do things one way, you do things another way. There's cultural diversity here. We're not going to sort of jump up and down and throw our toys out the pram saying that we do things better or the right way compared to you. So in that sense, I think what we're looking at when we see those surviving urns on Sicily is the example of a particular culture that did things in a particular way, and we're looking at it during a period when there was a huge amount of overlap and interaction between, particularly on Sicily, between the Carthaginian and the Greek colonies that were based there on the island. And we see that, and we saw that at Motya in the film a couple of minutes later after we were looking at those urns. We look at the Motya charioteer, which is an incredible sculpture that has survived from Motya. But it's a very odd one because it's of a charioteer, Greek charioteer, dressed in a sort of toga, but I always describe it as dressed in a toga as if they've just been into a wet t-shirt competition, because the sort of Greek shit on what is it? It's a charioteer's robe that they would wear when driving the chariot is kind of sticking to every bit of their body, and you can see absolutely every aspect of their extraordinary musculature and, dare one say it, of their lunchbox. And that is a kind of design of sculpture that you just wouldn't see within the Greek world, because a charioteer was considered to be not the owner of the chariot and the winner of the chariot race. He was just the person driving the chariot. Actually, the owner of the horses was the winner, and they were the ones who would be represented in the sort of athletic, nude, heroic pose that we know from Greek sculpture. So this seems to be a very odd mishmash of styles. It's of a charioteer, but shown in the heroic kind of owner model, and lots of people have tried to explain it as a sort of Carthaginian attempt to do sculpture in the way that the Greeks wanted it to be done, as a way of communicating between these two cultures, or alternatively it could be meant to represent not a charioteer at all, but a sort of Carthaginian Greek crossover deity, so Heracles Melkart, for instance. But it's a great example of where two cultures are trying to talk to one another and ending up with this very unusual cultural mishmash. Hello Debbie, you're going to Naples next week. Shelley, how are you doing? Kind of, yes, the toga kind of out of time, out of place, out of date. But there we have it. So I think what the Sicilian documentary really brought home to me is that in every age of Sicily's history, whether you're talking about the Carthaginians and the Greeks in the 7th, 6th and 5th centuries BCE, whether you dial forward to the era of the Romans, or whether you go forward in time through to the era of the Arab conquest, of the Norman conquest, of the French, the British, etc., and their presence in Sicily, or indeed its reunification, Sicily's role in the reunification of Italy to today, and its welcoming gesture towards migrants coming up from Africa, you see in Sicily a pretty unique ability to welcome and allow cultures to mix within a grand melting pot with extraordinary cultural kind of creations as a result. So, Irvin, thank you very much for that question. I hope you get a chance to view the Sicily documentary online. It's on BBC iPlayer, and do kind of have a look at it. Now, before I forget, I have to announce, of course, that we have hit 6,000 followers on the Facebook page. Thank you so much indeed for following the Facebook page. Absolutely brilliant. We have hit the magic number of 6,000, which means it is prize giving time. Absolutely. So, at some point this evening, Can't possibly tell you exactly when. Keep an eye on the Facebook page. A post will be going live to celebrate the fact that we've hit over 6,000 followers. You have 48 hours from when that post goes live to like it. And everyone who likes it will be entered into the prize draw for a book, a signed copy of my book, Ancient Worlds, and there'll be a video from me announcing the winner as well. So keep your eyes peeled on the Facebook page for that post coming out later this evening, and like away to be in with a chance of winning the book. And now we must go on. There's another question that I wanted to get to that I've been holding back from previous weeks, and that came in from Pauline O'Donovan. I'm so glad you're enjoying the competition idea. Hello Latifa, hello Linda, how are you doing? Good afternoon everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining this live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott, coming live from the London Library in the heart of London. Please, fingers crossed. Ooh, absolutely, fingers crossed. So the question I've been meaning to get to for a couple of weeks, Pauline O'Donovan, and this came in response after I was in Belfast a couple of weeks ago talking with the Classical Association of Northern Ireland, and was joined by Helen Rowell. Pauline's asking about the Etruscans. Now, we didn't talk about the Etruscans so much in the Q&A, but on a recent visit there, particularly to Civeteri and Tarquinia, Pauline was looking in the museum and was looking at all the vases and the stuff that was found there, and was wondering how did this stuff end up in Etruria, because many of the things that are in the museums of Etruria in Italy are Greek. In fact, the majority of the Greek vases, the drinking cups that we study from the Greek Symposium, actually come out of graves in Italy rather than being found in Greece. So many of these seem to have found their way over to Etruria, and not just potentially been used in Etruscan style drinking escapades, but then treated as such precious items that they were put into the graves with these people. And that's quite a different thing than we actually see in Greece itself, where fairly rarely do Greek painted drinking cups and drinking ware make their way into grave assemblages. But here in Etruria, we see that seems to be the way to do things, and so we get tons and tons of stuff. Now, this is, of course, absolutely fantastic for us as archaeologists. We absolutely love it, and our main study of these Greek vases has been able to take off because of it. But Pauline's question is kind of, were the things that were sent there exactly the same as the stuff that was going to be available in Athens, or kind of were they exported from Athens and from Greece more widely to Etruria as a sort of export market? And you are dead right, Pauline. We know that at least in part this was an export market, that Greek cities, in particular Athens and Corinth and other major pottery producing centres, were exporting their wares to Etruria because they knew that there was a real demand and a market for them. Now that produces an interesting question, because if we study the stuff that's found in Etruria as exemplars of Greek vases and then presuppose that that stuff is exactly the same stuff as they would have been using in Greece, we are kind of missing over, or kind of not really kind of focusing on the fact that if they're making this stuff for an export market, they could well have been making it differently, to tune in, if you like, to the particular likes and dislikes of the audience of the export market compared to the stuff that they were using at home. And we know in at least a couple of occasions that they were doing this, that they were tuning this material to be of a kind of particular particularly appropriate for their Etrurian export markets, particularly when you look at some of the examples that have survived which have Greek writing on them. Now, you think, well, put Greek writing on it, Greek is Greek, isn't it? But is it? So what seems to have happened in these cases is that the Greeks sitting in Athens, Corinth, etc., knew that the Etrurians loved something if it clearly came from Greece. There was a kind of cultural attachment to having something that came from Greece that kind of said something very, very good about you within Etrurian culture. But Etrurians didn't necessarily read Greek. So what we find are examples of vases where there is Greek writing on these vases, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It's gobbledygook Greek. So here we have Athenian potters, for example, knowing that Greek things go down well in an export market, market over in Etruria and writing as a result gobbledygook Greek sentences because they know they won't be able to read it, but they know they'll like it, the fact that it's got Greek letters. And if they're willing to do that, then what's to stop them changing lots more aspects of the images, perhaps on the Greek vases, to make them more akin and more attractive to their Etrurian export market, different from what they might have been using at home. So thank you, Pauline, for that question. And yes, it just goes to show you that the global nature of trade, of import and export, was there alive in the ancient world. And here we have cunning potters making changes, and cunning potter painters making changes to make things more appropriate for the markets that they were going to. And it does remind you, when we've talked about this, other people before, it reminds me of how we have lots of brands today that get their coolness from the fact that they've got foreign writing on them. And half the time we don't know exactly at all what that writing truly says. And sometimes you can imagine they will have been perhaps playing a fast one or two on us. Or indeed with tattoos, yes, the infamous mistakes that can happen in tattoos when you get things put in a language you don't understand, when you're told it means one thing and actually it ends up meaning another. So thank you, Pauline, for that question. Absolutely great question indeed. Now let's have a quick break to talk about what's in the news and what's on. So you may have seen this, and we've tweeted about it on the tweeted out about it, but also put links on the Facebook page, that in southern Italian port city of Bari, we're all over Italy today, we're talking lots about Italy, there has been the discovery of a new ancient Greek necropolis. So dating from the era of Greek colonies in southern Italy, we've got a new ancient Greek necropolis. That's a city of the dead, cemeteries, graves, and this is just come out from the Archaeology News Network. It's an ancient Greek necropolis dating to the 4th century BCE, so it was quite late on in the era of Greek contact with southern Italy, and we've got pit tombs dating back to the 5th and 3rd centuries BC, so it'll be interesting to hear more about that as it unfolds. From Pompeii as well, you may have seen the link, I think we've put it on the Facebook page, certainly on my Twitter. Another bar has been found and is being uncovered in the fantastic ongoing excavations at Pompeii, another place where you can imagine the Pompeians and travellers to and from the city hanging out to get a much needed glass of something strong to relax with at the end of the day. And then in terms of what's on, well, I flagged that the Sicily series is on iPlayer right now, on BBC iPlayer, and also don't forget Ancient Invisible Cities. It seems to have now been extended, its run on BBC iPlayer for another long period of time, so you can get Cairo, Athens and Istanbul as well on the iPlayer, so don't forget about that. Also, if you are an undergraduate student of the classical world and you're thinking about what to do with your summers, do think about the British School at Rome, or indeed the British School at Athens, summer undergraduate summer schools. Now, I did the British School at Rome summer undergraduate summer school in 2002, and I taught the British School at Athens undergraduate summer school in 2005, and they were absolutely extraordinary experiences. You get 2 weeks in Rome, 3 weeks in Athens to engage with some of the best minds on the ground, where they take you around all the key archaeological sites, and you really get up close and personal with the material. So if you are a student studying the ancient world, get applying to these fantastic courses, and there are bursaries to help out with financial hardship for both of them. So they are absolutely unique experiences where you get to stay in the British School of Rome or the British School of Athens, which are the archaeological, ancient, historical, and indeed modern studies of. They are the kind of focus, if you like, for the institutes through which all British interest in Italy and Greece, respectively, for whatever era of study you're interested in, is channeled. And so they are fantastic research hubs. The British School at Rome is in a beautiful building that has a frontage that makes it look like the British Museum, and in fact it's on Piazza, so-called Winston Churchill. It was named in thanks by the Italians as Piazza Winston Churchill after the Second World War, although I can't imagine why the British School at Rome never likes to actually use that address. It prefers the Italian name of the street that they're on, Via Gramsci. And the British School at Athens is an beautiful building with perhaps one of the best libraries and most evocative libraries I've ever had the luck to work in anywhere in the world, sitting in Kolonaki, one of the quite shishi areas of modern day Athens. So make sure you apply if you get a chance, the British School at Rome or the British School at Athens summer undergraduate school. And in terms of books that have come out, well, one of the ones that I wanted to flag with you this week was a Silk Roads book that's come out. Well, it's been reviewed recently and came out sort of earlier this year. Silk, Slaves and Stupas, Material Culture of the Silk Road by Susan Whitfield at the University, published by the University of California Press. So definitely have a check that one out. Silk, Slaves and Stupas. And it does a little bit like the British Museum History of the World in 100 Objects. It takes key objects and tells their story in order to, as a result, evoke the extraordinary nature, communication network, trade network, ideas moving network of the Silk Road, stretching all away from the Mediterranean through to China. So have a look at that if you can. In terms of talks and things coming up, I am going to be in New York next week. So next Thursday there will be no Q&A. To remind you, that's the 4th of April, because I'm actually going to be talking at a conference in New York. If you are in New York next week, it is an open conference to the public. It is free to register and come along. So it is going to be held by the New School Centre for Public Scholarship. That's down in sort of Tribeca area, and I'm talking on the 4th of April between 3 and 5:30, and the conference is about unknowability. How do we know what cannot be known? I'm going to be talking about the case study of the Delphic Oracle and the unknowability at the heart of the ancient Greek world. So if you can get along to New York next Thursday, the 4th of April, come along and have a listen. Do register on the website. If you Google New School Centre for Public Scholarship, you'll find the conference. And then, so we won't be doing a Q&A, but I do promise you some live quick videos from different spots around New York. So keep an eye on the Facebook page for those through the second half of next week. Can I come down to Brazil? Oh, I would love to get back down to Brazil after I was last there teaching in 2010. So we need to try and find a good reason to come down to Brazil. But we will be back for the Facebook Q&A, the live Facebook Q&A on the 11th of April. That's the following Thursday. So get your questions in the usual way to www.facebook.com/MichaelScottAcademic or via michaelscottacademic@gmail.com. That would be absolutely fantastic. I can't wait. And we will also be, in the meantime, between now and the 11th of April, announcing, of course, the prize winner for all those likes of the new 6,000 followers post that will be going up later today. So that's the 4th of April. I'm going to be talking in New York. Then back in the UK in Buckingham, I will be talking at the Buckingham History Festival on the 27th of April. So you can get your tickets now. That's all live on the website, the Buckingham History Festival. I'm going to be talking about ancient worlds and the Silk Roads. And then on the 9th of May, back in London, I'm talking at the Warwick in London Centre, at the Knowledge Centre just by King's Cross. And I'm going to be talking about visualising the ancient Greek world. Tickets for all of those things are, well, for Warwick in London, free tickets. You just need to register on the website. Look at the link that's on the Facebook page. Buckingham History Festival, you have to buy your ticket. And New York, again, it's free if you're in New York. And James reminds me, yes, it is indeed my birthday soon. It is my birthday on the 3rd of April. So the day before, I will be in New York for my birthday and kind of pottering around there. So that's the 3rd of April. That makes me an Aries, which means that I'm like a bull in a china shop with most things, full of enthusiasm, knocking stuff over as I go, hopefully not too much. So thank you very much for the birthday wishes again, and we look forward to catching up with you guys after the birthday with some videos. I'll try and do a video on my birthday from New York and post it to the Facebook page. How's about all of that? We'll do that. I'm in New York through until the 7th and then back to the UK. Now, we've got time for another quick question or two now, which was the one I wanted to do. Yes, we had Pauline. We've done Pauline. Alexis Brown. Yes, a question that came in a little while ago as well. What effect, this is an interesting one, what effect will the internet and the Facebook have on future historians? Ooh, interesting question. What effect will the internet and the Facebook have on future historians? With all daily occurrences broadcast for all to see, like we're doing now with our Facebook Q&A, will we need archaeologists and historians in the future? And if so, what aspect of life today do you think these future historians will be puzzling over? Well, Brexit, for one thing. They are most certainly going to be puzzling over Brexit as to what we were doing, how we got ourselves in and out of this mess in the first place. But you're absolutely right. One of the things that we've seen in recent time is an utter explosion of the amount of evidence there is going to be preserved through to the future for historians to sift through as they try to create balanced, in-depth, textured, nuanced understandings of our now. Hello, Sarah from Crete, and you've got a Bugatti. Oh, you lucky devil. Oh, is it warm? Is the cream just fresh? Pastry, crunchy. Oh, lucky you. Thank you. Oh, you lucky devil. Do send us a picture. Send us a picture of you enjoying your Bugatti, Sarah, in Crete through to the Facebook page so that we can all admire and sort of have a little bit of Bugatti envy. If any of you don't know what Bugatti is, look this up. And next time you are in Crete or anywhere in northern Greece as well, if you're up in Thessaloniki, something like that, make sure you order Bugatti because it's the best thing ever. So yes, how are historians going to deal with this huge weight of evidence that they're going to have to sift through? Well, I think the way we deal with evidence at the moment is that we look at a particular topic that we're interested in, and then we look at the available sources around it, and we make judgment calls almost immediately on which we think are the more authoritative pieces of evidence. That might be because they're geographically closer to the issue we're interested in, temporally closer, that they come from a source which is reputed to be quite authoritative. And so I suspect a lot of that sifting will need to go on an even more extreme basis. There's no way that historians can look in the traditional ways through all of that data, as in close analysis of that data. There will have to be a sort of priority list made. But at the same time, the big thing that's being developed right now that everyone's talking about, of course, is big data. It's not necessarily looking in the traditional forms of close analysis at everything, but using that wealth and massive amount of data to then churn it through to create patterns and understanding of the past that's simply not possible when you have a much smaller data pool. So I think historians will be doing, of the future, will be doing two things. They'll be making kind of quite hard and fast decisions about what are the key sources that they want to analyse in close detail. And then they'll also simultaneously be trying to access big data analysis of large swathes of data, everything we're putting on Facebook and Twitter, etc., to try and understand the bigger underlying trends that are motivating society or interesting society at any one point in time. Will we need archaeologists and historians? Absolutely, yes, we will. We will need, simply because of that massive amount of evidence, we will need those people and those conduits and channels who will sift and help us understand and make sense of the past. I think we will get ever more, as we should, kind of demanding for how that image of the past is presented to us. We're in an era right now where we talk about kind of no need for the expert, the dismissal of the expert. Everyone is entitled to have their own view on an issue, whether or not they've studied it. And all of those used to be treated equally, whether or not they've studied it for more or less time. And I think we will kind of inevitably get back towards a position where there is, again, everyone has a kind of perceived hierarchy of whose voice they trust to give them a balanced view of whatever it is that they're looking at, and that will include looking at the past. So historians and archaeologists will be necessary. Archaeologists will be using, of course, ever whizzier technology to be able to investigate the past without necessarily digging it all up. So I'm thinking about all the GIS surveys that are now able to do, where you can find out what's underneath the ground without ever having to excavate it. The sort of kind of laser scan and DNA testing that's now possible that will allow individual pieces of evidence to tell us so much more than it does right now. And of course, kind of we imagine that kind of the whole world's on Facebook, etc., but certainly vast swathes of the world are not. And if we're going to keep a more balanced interest in all different aspects and corners of the world, as we should, then we're going to have a range of techniques to respond to that. So, Alexis, thank you very much indeed for your question. And talking about archaeologists of the future, if you haven't had a look at it already, you must go and Google search for Motel of the Mysteries, a great online comic strip book which is based kind of about 1,000 years hence when they're excavating an American motel and they don't have any literary sources relating to the culture that has produced the hotel, so they're examining it and excavating it from first principles and trying to work out what's going on, and huge amounts of hilarity ensue. So Google Motel of the Mysteries. We'll put up the link on the Facebook page and have a look. Please, please, please. Donald Trump being compared with another Caesar or Roman emperor. In fact, there's been a number. It's amazing how often the classical world comes back into it for the fore, and it's being used as comparisons for issues of great political crisis. So just in the last couple of days to do with Brexit, we've heard of a number of different classical analogies. The certain members of the ERG have been compared to Spartans. Yesterday there was an MP talking about how we have to try and make ourselves either the Boadicea or the Romans, I'm not quite sure which way round, in the great take of the British conquest of the Roman conquest of Britain. It's amazing how we sort of try to almost find comfort, I guess, to a certain extent in these analogies, but as a result, how often wrong and inappropriate they are, misguiding us more on the topic than helping us. So I think we should be very, very careful whenever. You should always be suspicious when you hear about someone making an analogy to the ancient world. Our time is up. Thank you so much for joining in the Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. Just a reminder, there is no Q&A next week, 4th of April, because I'm in New York, but there will be some videos on the Facebook page for me saying hello to you all. We're back on the 11th of April, so send in your questions. Thank you so much for the questions that we've got to today. Tons more to get to, and keep sending in what's on, books that you're reading that you're interested in. Send your photos of places you've been in the classical world and the ancient world to the Facebook page, and we like sharing all of those and showing what a fantastic and wonderful community we all are. And of course, don't forget, lastly, the competition kicking off this evening to celebrate 6,000 followers. Kind of like it within the next 48 hours to be in with a chance of having a book. Have a wonderful rest of the day, a wonderful weekend, and enjoy yourselves.